So as the title suggests, I did nearly fail high school. Now, generally speaking, people say it's because you're lazy. That's why people say that most people fail, but it was completely different story. So I don't have to backtrack and go to the point where go to the point like around the age of 4, like that was when my symptoms started with symptoms mainly of anxiety and autism. My parents would, like lock me into a closet, and at that time, sometimes it'd be for long periods of time, and I sort of learned to live in sort of a fantasy world, like sort of it was a coping strategy. It's called association. So what I would do is I would sort of fantasize about living in a nice place, maybe being at the beach or maybe being in a resort, fantasy, some sort of nice place, and just dream of that just to cope with the time, and then yes, absolutely, I would pass the time. So I did that all throughout, even in high school. I was still doing that, living in a fantasy world. Now, I remember I did grade 11 English after grade 10. So in grade 11, I was doing grade 12 English, and I remember there was a short story called Horse of the Night. Now it's about it's written by Margaret Lawrence, and she had two main characters who often appeared in her short stories, Veronica and her brother Roderick. Now, Veronica is a very young girl at the start of the story. She's only 6 years old. There's this boy Chris who's 15, and well, he lives in kind of a toxic reality. It's during the Great Depression, uh, but he lives in a toxic reality, and he copes by living in his own fantasy world. Now, he continues to live in this fantasy world many years later, and then when he's around 21 or something, he's forced to go to war, and he sends a letter to Veronica saying they can force his body to march and even to kill, but what they didn't know is he'd fooled them, that the body didn't live inside it anymore. So pretty much what happens is he ends up getting a mental breakdown in the war. Like he's deployed, and then he gets a mental breakdown, and ultimately is at first violent and then passive, and there's no improvement to him. He's pretty much completely gone. The short story is pretty much about how you perceive life and how you take control of your life. And he lived in a fantasy world, and then eventually, when the truth hit him, it killed him. But yeah, all the same, I in high school, it had nothing to do with laziness. Like it had to do with the fact that I was coping by living in a fantasy world. I was bullied every day, just being that weird kid, somebody who just didn't belong, and I kind of lived in that fantasy world, and naturally I had motivation, but some motivation would come and go, because I still had to continue to live in that fantasy world to survive. Now, naturally, when I went to university, was no longer living that kind of thing. I was better medicated, better focused, and I did do pretty decent. It's just that, of course, with autism, it is difficult. The program that was chosen by my parents. My parents chose nursing for me, and I could not do the clinicals. When it came to the courses, the theory, I did really well, but when it came to when it came to the practicums, that's where I failed. I'm still, thinking, planning to go back to school eventually, but I really have to figure out what is good for me. I'm leaning towards occupational therapy assistant or physiotherapy assistant, something like that. Something that where I'm dealing with people, but using my brain more than my hands, no fine motor skills. So that's what I'm planning. But yeah, anyway, a lot of people with schizophrenia have to unfortunately cope by living in a fantasy world because of how difficult it can be to live sometimes. And that is number one reason why a majority of people with schizophrenia turn to drugs, alcohol, and that's something that I just couldn't get to doing. There is a YouTuber, Elliot McGavin, I believe he's deleted the video, but he actually used to do, he knew weed was bad for him, but he would still smoke weed just to get into the fantasy world. Now, unfortunately, weed is even worse for people with schizophrenia because there's more dopamine production as substantia nigra with schizophrenia, and absolutely it doesn't work. But anyway, I'm just going to end the video there. As always, thanks for watching.